Jesus, she stinks. Get us out of our fumes, said Finn. The interceptor darted forward, jumping over her quarry's wake, and came up alongside her. Finn aimed the spotlight at La Katrina's portside window, but it too was tinted. He frowned. "Let's give her the warning shot," he said, shouting over the noise of the outboards and rushing air. Diego nodded and pushed the interceptor about 20 feet ahead of La Katrina. Finn pulled the Remington 870 from its holder and racked the action. The shotgun was loaded with a flashbang shell, harmless but intimidating. He aimed at a spot about 10 feet ahead of the sport fisher. "On target," he said loudly enough for Diego to hear. Then he thumbed down the safety, drew breath, and pulled the trigger. A violent flash of white light tore up the darkness just ahead of La Katrina. The sound cracked through Finn's skull. He felt it in his teeth. La Katrina responded by accelerating right through the cloud of smoke from the shotgun. "Son of a bitch," said Finn, and he glanced in Diego's direction. His younger friend was waiting for him to call their next move. Finn was vessel commander, so it was his call. He looked at the eastern horizon. Sunrise wasn't far off. He put the shotgun back in its holder, picked up the radio mic, and called the Air and Marine Operations Center. He gave their position, their course, their speed, and a description of the praying mantis. He said that she'd been running with her lights out and hadn't responded to their signals to heave to or to their warning shot. Then he said, "I intend to board the vessel while underway. Over." "While she's moving?" said Diego. Finn heard the surprise in Diego's voice. He signed off and hung up the mic. "Sure, we practiced it plenty in St. Augustine," he said, referring to the CBP's National Marine Training Center in St. Augustine, Florida. "Yeah, but that was training. And we don't know who's in there," said Diego, pointing at the sport fisher. Finn turned to look at their quarry. "So let's go find out," he said. The two boats were running no more than 6 feet apart, a narrowing channel of water rushing between them. Dawn was unfurling quickly, and Finn could now see La Katrina's teak deck with his naked eye, though he still couldn't see through the tinted windows into her cabin. He had the uncomfortable feeling of being watched. He put a foot up on the interceptor's gunwale and prepared to leap across. Just then, La Katrina veered left hard. Diego reacted quickly enough to avoid slamming the interceptor into her, but not quickly enough to prevent the two boats' sides grinding against each other. The impact threw Finn backward. He landed hard on the deck, right on his tailbone. Diego eased off the throttle and the interceptor drifted to a stop. He yelled to see if Finn was all right. Finn ignored him and made a show of bending over the side of the boat to check for damage. Turned out that only his pride and maybe his coccyx were bruised. Making a supreme effort to ignore the pain in his backside, he walked stiffly back toward the console. "Well, don't just stand there," he said, sounding sharper than he intended. "Go after him." Diego closed the gap with La Katrina. Finn's knees and spine shuddered each time the interceptor slapped down on the face of the sea, sending up a spray of salt water. Soon they were running 30 feet or so behind the fleeing boat. Of the two boats, Finn knew the interceptor was the faster. He figured 30 knots was the sport fisher's top speed, whereas the interceptor still had at least 20 more in her. No way the suspect boat could outrun them. Trouble was, he and Diego were at the end of a 6-hour shift. They had enough left in the tank to get back to the dock at Long Beach, but not enough to chase this bozo for miles across the sea. He had a choice: either figure out how to force La Katrina to stop now, or call it in and let the guys in San Diego make the intercept. Finn's pride was bruised enough as it was. He wasn't going to let someone else catch his prey. He thought for a moment. Then he went forward and grabbed a mooring line and 2 fenders. He pulled out his knife, cut off a 15-foot length of mooring line, and tied a fender to each end. Then he went back to the console and told Diego his plan. Diego smiled. "That's even dumber than your last idea," he said. "I like it." It was a tricky maneuver at any speed, let alone at 30 knots. Both men knew that Finn was by far the better helmsman, and